What?
And I'll have the grapefruit juice, just as long as those grapefruits are freshly squeezed.
My name's Audrey Horne.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Dale Cooper.
Audrey Horne is the daughter of local business magnate Benjamin Horne. She lives in Twin Peaks together with her mother Sylvia and mentally challenged brother Johnny. Audrey is a major character right from the beginning and becomes involved in multiple story threads, including the brothel One-Eyed Jack's, the mill being burned, falling in love with Agent Cooper, and rehabilitating her evil father after his change of heart. Audrey begins the show as a playful troublemaker. She's a spoiled child who delights in playing cruel jokes on others.
What would happen if I pulled this out?
You wouldn't.
Audrey dresses as if she's from the 1950s and often has a cute, devilish smirk on her face. You always expect great clothing ideas from Audrey. She plays infantile pranks on her family, behaving like a 10 or 11-year-old child, not an 18-year-old young woman. Audrey is a naïve who doesn't seem to have any comprehension of the seriousness of life. It's not uncommon to see Audrey swaying dreamily to music, lost in some fantasy world. Especially early on, she can act like a demanding brat who expects everything she wants handed to her on a silver platter. Considering her family is wealthy and privileged, she likely grew up with instant gratification for all of her desires. Audrey is also playful and girlish with the new man in town, FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper. Audrey likes to ambush Cooper at breakfast and act deliciously coquettish around him.
You know, sometimes I get so flushed. It's interesting. Do your palms ever itch?
The two are clearly set up as a romantic couple. They trade enough romantic dialogue and express quite a bit of interest on both sides. Cooper is quite willing at the start to play along and respond to Audrey's interest coyly. She eventually takes it too far for him when she ends up naked in his bed at the Great Northern Hotel. Cooper realizes he hasn't nipped things in the bud quite thoroughly up to this point and gently lets her down. He treats her more fatherly, even underlining that by getting a plate of fries and a couple of malts to talk over her problems. Their relationship closes at this point, and quite a few fans, including me, were upset about this. The sudden ending of their attraction and flirting is jarring and strange. The show just abruptly shifts course and moves both characters into different directions. It's especially irritating because that would have been perfect reason to continue relevance for Audrey after she was sucked into the inevitable drift of peripheral events that occupied so many characters in the middle of the second season. Her meaning to the overall plot would have been assured if she was at least dating Dale Cooper, the show's lead. This topic excites quite a bit of controversy among the Twin Peaks fan community. Some, like me, are unhappy about the way things went between the two characters, but others suggest that their relationship would have been inappropriate because of the power imbalance between an 18-year-old and a 30-year-old. In real life, I've seen relationships like that succeed and I've seen them fail. I personally don't think there is anything wrong with the age gap on the show. As long as both partners are mature and intelligent, no matter their experience, they should be together. Audrey was far from mature, but she became so in the middle of the second season. She was also bright, capable, bold, and all around possessed many strong character qualities that belied her age. I think she would have made a great partner for Agent Cooper. She even saves his career once by helping to quash charges of drug smuggling. I don't mean to offend anyone with this, and I entirely understand your reasoning if you think it's not seemly for a 30-year-old man, I'm assuming Cooper is around 30 because that's how old Kyle MacLachlan was at the time, to date an 18-year-old. It's a contentious issue, so I'll leave it at that. From my perspective, it's deeply unfortunate that we never see the results of this relationship blossom. Cooper eventually ends up with a more exact copy of his behavior and interests in Annie Blackburn. Audrey's interactions with her father are originally combative and unpleasant. Her bratty behavior is designed to irritate him and drive him crazy. She even intentionally destroys a hard-fought business deal worth millions. They work to snipe at each other all the time. What may have caused this anger is unknown. Ben says of his daughter,
Laura died 2 days ago. I lost you years ago.
this is wounding, painful stuff between a father and his teenage child. Ben is frustrated by Audrey's childishness. He has a cynical attitude towards her from the years of trickery. Ben mentions to Agent Cooper that his daughter is missing and he didn't even notice it for 2 days. How detached do you have to be from events to forget your high school daughter is missing? Ben is usually far more interested in his own life, his own fun and women and money to pay close attention to any family member. But Audrey's mother doesn't notice she's missing either, apparently. Audrey has probably been ignored for her entire life and strikes back with her pranks. It's an obvious cry for negative attention, but those cries are ignored or they make matters worse with her parents. Both Audrey and Ben are stuck in a dark place during the first season. They're both quite selfish and allow neglect and contempt to fester. Neither are entirely good or bad. We can infer that Audrey has been vaguely aware from years of watching at the margins that her father is up to something bad, and she wants to know what it is. Early on in the series, Audrey decides to investigate Laura Palmer's death. Her reasons for this are a bit unclear. They seem to have had a very high school mean girl style attitude to one another. At school, Audrey has a mildly abrasive attitude towards Donna Hayward as well. One of the best scenes on the show is, oddly enough, in the bathroom at Twin Peaks High School. I love the bright coloring and mountain designs on the stalls and walls. It's a hermetically sealed, ultra clean room, unlike any bathroom in reality. Audrey and Donna have a sparring conversation like catty high school girls would. They never openly reveal their antipathy, they just trade jabs.
Maybe you should run away and join the circus.
Escape. I got a better idea. A tall, dark, and handsome stranger falls madly in love with me, takes me away to a life of mystery and international intrigue.
You mean the FBI agent? Dream on.
Their interaction is especially odd considering what we learn about Donna and Audrey's connection in the later second season. Donna seems to be a bit patronizing to Audrey, but comes around when she tells her she wants to solve Laura Palmer's murder. Audrey's immediate motive is to impress Agent Cooper with her detective work. The logic of an inexperienced kid. She thrills to be a sidekick to a detective and imagines he'll be appreciative rather than scared for her life. Another set of young people, James Hurley and Donna Hayward, also involve themselves in risky behavior to find Laura's killer, but they're motivated by powerful emotional drives of love and friendship. Audrey's desires are far more selfish and murky. Perhaps she does have some desire to avenge Laura, but it's weak and overridden by other competing desires. It's also possible she wants to discover her father's secrets. She knows based on her snooping that a lot of strange things are going on in the Horne household. She's alternately amused and hurt by the intriguing and double-dealing she witnesses. Armed with this collection of frequently selfish, unworkable, and conflicting motives, she sets out to find Laura's killer. Audrey has heard of a place called One-Eyed Jack's. She knows it's a brothel, but we don't know where she learned of it exactly. Perhaps from her father while snooping, but she doesn't know exactly where it is, who runs it, or other finer details. But she knows enough to suspect it's involved with Laura and tells Agent Cooper about it. Cooper inadvertently leads Audrey to the perfume counter of her father's department store. Unbeknownst to Audrey, her father is the owner of One-Eyed Jack's and is hiring prostitutes from the young girls of the town. The massive procurement scheme has sent an unknown number of women from the fragrances department to a life of hooking and gambling. Laura Palmer and Ronette Pulaski were among them and worked at the brothel for a short time. Both girls worked as hookers with Jacques Renault as middleman. Perhaps One-Eyed Jack's is where they first became involved with that lifestyle. Despite their antagonistic relationship, Audrey and Laura actually go through a similar experience with their fathers. Both of them are innocents who are living in a hazy world of American perfection, with nary a blemish on the surface, and both of them discover a horrible truth about the sexual and criminal behavior of their fathers. Audrey's is less extreme, of course, but her journey of discovery also ends by witnessing and being victimized by her father's ugly, cruel sexual behavior. Laura and Audrey are snapped out of the dreamy worlds around them to see a monster right under their own noses staring back at them. At first, Audrey is able to use her clout and power to get what she wants. She offers childish bullying threats to Emery Battis, the head of the fragrance department. Audrey reveals quite a bit about herself when doing this, and she does it multiple times through the series. It's her way or the highway, and she'll push aside anyone who is an obstacle to that.
Emery, here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna tell my father that I'm busy as a bee wrapping boxes with the drones. Then you're gonna put me to work this afternoon behind the perfume counter. Because if you don't, I'm gonna rip my dress in half and scream at the top of my lungs and tell my father that you made a pass at me. Does that help to clear things up for you?
After getting a job at the fragrance counter, she's able to pry enough info from a co-worker to find out where the girls of One-Eyed Jack's come from. And soon enough, Audrey is on her way to the brothel to find out what happened to Laura. This is a rash course of action. She does not have any certainty that the brothel will hold clues to Laura's death. Her time there does reveal plenty about the town, but it was irrelevant to the Palmer case. When she arrives at the brothel, she poses as a hooker looking for a job. Using her considerable beauty, she is able to land that job. What in the hell was Audrey thinking here? I know she's lived a life of getting everything on a silver platter and not facing significant danger, but yikes. How does she plan on getting out of this? Did she imagine she would have time to wander around the brothel and get clues about Laura? Or was she planning on servicing some of the customers that came in? She seems to have resigned herself to that happening. The whole thing just seems poorly thought out on her part. Audrey gets the surprise of her life when she's told that the first client she'll be entertaining is the owner of the brothel, her father Benjamin Horne. What follows is one of the creepiest scenes of the show as Ben attempts to seduce his own daughter. Yuck. Audrey swiftly puts on a mask to disguise herself. Ben does not find out the girl he's getting a boner for is his daughter, so he doesn't stop groping and ogling her. Audrey escapes discovery when Ben is called away, leaving him oblivious and his daughter in despair. Her whole world is shattered and her father's lechery fills Audrey with a lingering disgust. But it would have been better overall if he had found his daughter there. The next segment of Audrey's story is the long drawn-out tale of her kidnap by the owners of the brothel. Blackie, the madam of the brothel who runs it for Ben when he's away, teams up with a group of criminals to steal ownership of One-Eyed Jacks from the Hornes. Audrey is swiftly subdued and placed under guard deep within the velvety red prison of the brothel. To make matters worse, her note explaining where she was is lost and the general hive of activity around town mean that her disappearance is not noticed for several days. Audrey loves to play games and she finally found one that was too tough and too scary for her, and the stakes were life and death.
I am in trouble, but I'm gonna come home now.
Trouble, Miss Horne. You don't know what trouble is. Not by a long shot.
The sins of the father are visited onto his daughter in the first half of the second season. Audrey is not just imprisoned, she is brutally mistreated by her captors. Visually, her helplessness is highlighted by being forced to wear nothing but a chemise and walk around barefoot. A hulking man with a gun follows her wherever she goes. Audrey's most horrid suffering is from forced injections of heroin. The drug leaves her struggling and painfully grasping up while sinking into blackness. She even cries out that she's falling like the badly abused Dorothy Valens in Blue Velvet.
Stuck so heavy. My hand in my throat. It hurts me. God, it hurts me. That cold. I can't breathe. Help me. Please help me. I'm sinking.
It's not ever addressed thoroughly, but Ben Horne seems to have gotten Blackie addicted to heroin at some point in the past, and maybe that sent her down the career of becoming a prostitute. She bitterly resents him, if not outright hates him, for destroying her life with addiction. So Blackie takes some of the most perverse pleasure on the show by trying to destroy Ben's daughter, in an act of intergenerational retaliation. Eventually, Audrey is rescued from the brothel by Agent Cooper in the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department. During the rescue, she was given an overdose of heroin and nearly died. When extricated from her prison, she has been viciously drugged, beaten, and intimidated for days, including witnessing a cold-blooded murder right next to her. But Audrey is more angry than afraid. Her father didn't do any of that to her, but she's furious at him for creating and supporting an underworld that could do that. Audrey becomes part of a host of Twin Peaks characters who went through massive changes in the second season. Unlike her father's change, though, Audrey's was remarkable and believable. Audrey is a smart person, but naive and unworldly. Her shenanigans in the first season leads her to a very foolish decision she has to pay for with savage punishment. On the other side of this darkness, she has finally matured into a sensible person. Audrey enters the second half of season 2 assured, capable, and ready to logically meet challenges around her, and a challenge comes up almost immediately. Audrey reveals to Ben everything she's learned about his criminal dealings, and he's paralyzed with shame. The characters have done a complete turnabout in about 15 episodes. Originally, she was a willful child being reproached by her father for capriciousness and mischief, but after the scales fall from her eyes, Audrey stands over her father in this scene literally as well as figuratively. She knows his wild, libidinous drives have led to far more harm than her naughty pranks ever could. Ben is now ashamed of his actions, and his daughter can question when she lost him, if she ever had a part of his heart at all. Audrey is so disillusioned with her dad that she even thinks he might have murdered Laura Palmer. She even does something a bit questionable and gives Agent Cooper information about Ben that leads to his arrest. I don't know how to feel about that. She's obviously upset with him for his criminal behavior, but Ben was being assailed by the criminal schemes himself and did no personal harm to his daughter. He did provide the setting for the crimes to take place, but Ben never wanted his daughter hurt. She also learned essentially nothing about Ben's relationship with Laura, only that she worked there and he slept with her. Not really enough to accuse him of murder and betray his trust to a lawman she's known for a week. A betrayal that may get her dad put in jail for the rest of his life and destroy her family. After the events with the brothel and Laura Palmer are resolved, Audrey is left adrift like quite a few other characters. Her place in the show is defined first by her relationship with Cooper, then with her imprisonment, then with, well, what exactly? She began to show her remarkably improved personality and maturity by taking charge of a serious issue in the family. Her father Ben is going progressively insane. This is actually a plausible reason for her to begin pitying her father after hating him for a number of episodes. Audrey swiftly takes charge of the scattershot family attempts from her brother Jerry and tries to return Ben to sanity. Oddly, we don't really see Ben's wife Sylvia during these scenes very much. Maybe because the actress, who only appeared a tiny number of times in the show, wasn't there, or maybe she hated her husband so much she decided to let him go crazy. Because Sylvia is such a minor character, we don't get a feeling of them together. I can't even remember Audrey interacting with her mother even once, even one line of dialogue between them. It may be there, but I don't recall it. For whatever reason, the task of saving the family falls on Audrey's teenage shoulders. She's challenged briefly by her uncle Jerry Horne, but she demolishes him with a word and asserts her control over events.
If my father becomes incapacitated, it all goes to me when I'm old enough. And I am old enough, dear, and he is incapacitated. Play my way either way. Or the only project you'll be developing is selling baseboard heaters at the local cash and carry.
After conferring with Bobby Briggs and Dr. Jacoby, Audrey successfully brings Ben out of his madness and sets the family on their final plotline of the show. The last few episodes of the series, Audrey is caught up in Ben's ridiculous attempt to steal back the Ghostwood forest from Catherine Martell. The series always divided its attention between the serious story surrounding Bob and a side plot about the Packard sawmill. However, in the early days, it fit in better with the show. The original mill subplot was filled with intrigue, violence, and crime. However, this new attempt to turn around their ownership of the land is pure comedy. The Martells tend to use crime as a reaction to the assaults of others, not as a first resort, so nothing comes from them. They're involved in their own plotline anyway. It would have been interesting to see if Ben and Audrey could remain good if their opponents were using evil means and they had no evil way to respond. The method Ben cooks up to save his business interests is a ridiculous plot to declare the entire woods protected in order to save a species of weasel from extinction. That's really lacking in excitement next to the continuous backstabbing and violence of the first season. It's really a sad joke that isn't too funny, and they spend the entire rest of the series doing it. It's also, on a logical level, doesn't seem to really work. Even if the woods are protected, how will that get the deed transferred to the Hornes? Catherine isn't going to sell after that, and even if Ben reacquired the land, he would also be forbidden from developing there. There's no way by these means they could halt the project. It's just a weak delaying tactic to stop the inevitable. The whole plot is boring and obviously can't lead to anything worthwhile, and Audrey has to fumble around confined by that story for a long time. It does, however, give Audrey a chance to show her new mature, intelligent attitude and business skills, but overall it wasn't worth it and a pathetic attempt to keep the family as part of the story. The last we hear about Audrey, she's messing around with this weasel nonsense. Boring. It's time to get here at long last and talk about something I've avoided for a long time. I debated whether I should even mention this, but I can't hold it off any longer. Audrey is gorgeous. I mean, sweet heaven. David Lynch said Audrey's actress, Sherilyn Fenn, is 5 feet of heaven in a ponytail, and that doesn't even half cover it. Sherilyn ranks among the sexiest women I've ever seen on TV, even including the beautiful women repeatedly naked on HBO and Showtime shows. Sherilyn Fenn outstrips them all, without even stripping. Her voice is dead sexy, her personality is perfect, and her behavior is enticing to say the least.
Is there anything I can do for you?
How about an ice cream?
Cup or cone?
Cone. I like to lick.
Twin Peaks was one of the sexiest shows ever on TV. You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting an absolute heart stopper. The show wasn't crassly sexual like Baywatch or something like that. It was sensual. It was a show pulsing with emotion and feeling all over the place. Desire was the gasoline that drove most of the characters on the show. It added the perfect element of charm and seduced the viewers with edgy dialogue and heavenly beauty. The limitations of network TV prevented the sexiness from going too far. The box of restrictions actually helped them by retaining nuance and subtlety. Sex, just like like fright in horror movies, oddly enough, is almost entirely based on mood and atmosphere, and a sexy aura is more important than the act itself. It didn't need the periodic nudity and strong sexual situations to quote the FCC of modern shows like Shameless or True Blood. All the people we see in Twin Peaks are dripping with desire that plays like a backbeat over everyone's behavior, and Audrey is at the fever pitch of sensuousness. She has grace, beauty, charm, and expertly plays the sexual game of teasing and luring. Despite all of this, however, it must be mentioned that much of this is a product of her imagination. Audrey reveals later on in the series that she's a virgin. Okay, so maybe they retcon that later, or maybe she has a unique definition of virgin, or maybe she's just has a really agile tongue. Anyway, her attitude with Agent Cooper is not someone who's sexually experienced at all. It's yet another game she likes to play with other people. Ben Horne claims his daughter has become an expert at manipulating people with her charms, and has strung along and knocked aside quite a few men in the past.
Let me give you the best advice that you're going to get all week. Men fall under the spell of Audrey's charms like ducks in a shooting gallery. And if you don't want a load of buckshot in your tail feathers, may I suggest that you park your jalopy outside of somebody else's window.
Only after her harrowing experience at One-Eyed Jack's is she ready to embrace a mature relationship. And that relationship is with yet another of my most hated characters on the show. He's not quite as bad as Richard Tremaine, but good lord is he annoying. His name is John Justice Wheeler.
Hiya. I just checked in room 215.
Oh, heaven help me with that guitar twang they play in the background every time he's on the screen. Wheeler is brought onto the show in the last few episodes to, do something, I guess. They're not really too clear on that. Audrey's dad has been defeated in all of his business dealings and has a powerful change of heart. He makes a conscious effort to be a good man, whatever he means by that. Wheeler is a former business partner of the Hornes, and Ben wants Wheeler to retrain him into being a good person. Right away, there are a bunch of problems here. First off, Wheeler is really young. How did he work with Ben in the past, and what did they do together? Wheeler seems to be a successful businessman on his own when he comes back to Ben's side, and yet he can't be over 30 years old. The character seems like he should be much older than that. Second, what did Ben teach him, and how can the student now teach the master? Thirdly, Wheeler doesn't seem to actually do anything. Ben follows his path in the last few episodes on his own advice and ideas. Wheeler doesn't visibly interact with or train Ben to do anything or facilitate any of his plans, really. He's entirely irrelevant to the storyline he was designed to be a part of. Wheeler is the most stock soap opera character ever put on the show. He's merely an appendix to the regular story meant to provide interaction to a character, Audrey, who is seeping ever away from relevance to the overall story. Seems like 100 other characters added onto Dynasty or The Bold and the Beautiful. He does bring up an odd topic about Twin Peaks, though. It has a distant Western movie style here and there. It's very distant, like a faint pulse of a dying man, but it's there. Some of the characters have bolo ties, Truman wears a cowboy hat, the roadhouse seems a bit Old West at times with hay strewn on the floor. John Justice Wheeler, there's an Old West name if I ever heard one, is an out-and-out cowboy. He even sings a god-awful rendition of Home on the Range. The Western style of clothing has a bit of flavor splashed onto the visuals of the show. They never should have had an actual damn cowboy show up to seduce Audrey. They haven't fixed anything about the age disparity with their relationship either. Audrey is still getting it on with someone much older than her. Around Cooper's age at least. They didn't fix anything. After courting for a few episodes, Wheeler ends up called away to another country as abruptly as he was called to Twin Peaks. Audrey makes love for the first time in Wheeler's plane. He has to rush off and leave Audrey in the lurch. Admittedly, the scene of him flying away in a private plane, leaving Audrey in tears, has a kind of beauty to it. She tasted love for once in her life, and it was ripped away from her just as quickly. I do appreciate the romantic side plots. Love is just as much a part of the emotional world of Twin Peaks, maybe the most powerful part, as anything else. But this story seems pale and unimportant next to everything else happening. It's a plot point from any old dull TV drama or soap opera, not the unique magic of Twin Peaks. I can only manage a very minor bit of praise in an otherwise dreary side plot involving a nobody character I hated, dating one of the best characters on the show, who should have ended up with the show's main lead. lead. On the other hand, the later episodes of Season 2 show a radically different relationship between Audrey and her father. Both have awful, painful experiences in the previous episodes, and come out on the other side as changed people. Audrey has grown up and embraced responsibility while her father has abandoned using his authority and money for evil. Together, after both realizing their mutual faults, they end their bitter feud and work together as equals to support the family and business. Despite my annoyance at Ben's conversion, I will admit that his happier, respectful relationship with his daughter is heartwarming and pleasant to watch. It's a mirror, if in less dramatic form, of the transformation that Bobby Briggs and his father, Major Briggs, go through to end their own parental battles.
I want to build a life in happiness for our whole family. You, me. Will you help me do that? Please.
Daddy, I'm your man.
Sensational.
Audrey is involved slightly with the major plotline of Wyndham Earle. Audrey and the other girls are stalked by the deranged ex-FBI agent. He slides into their lives discreetly and revels in making contact with them. Audrey and the others are only acted upon by Earle, though. They barely seem to recognize how serious this all is and how creepy the stalking is, and never can take steps to stop him. Only the persistent actions of the sheriff's department get them involved, but aside from her creepy interaction with Earle, Audrey never has anything to do with the Black Lodge storyline. If Audrey was dating Dale at this time, it would have been perfect for the series and a lot more powerful and meaningful for Audrey, a major character, to be trapped in the lodge rather than Annie. Sorry to keep harping on that. Audrey is one of the best characters on the show. I love watching her in whatever scene she's in, no matter if the overall story is good or not. Audrey is fun, beautiful, engaging, and just all around great. She ran the gamut on the show from funny to sexy to sad to mysterious to exciting. It was painful when she didn't end up with Cooper, but she still managed to be a great part of the show, driving the plot, impressing us with her boldness and risk-taking. Audrey has a nuanced relationship with her father, her love interests, and her friends that change and twist intelligently and believably. Her character changes, as any well-written character should, and I enjoy watching her grow up and accept seriousness and responsibility. Audrey's loves, her travails, and her family are serious, funny, complex, and worthy of reflection. Also, Audrey has some of the best haircuts on the show. Beautiful. And she sometimes gets them on a bi-episode basis. I mean, that's a beautiful head of hair. Audrey's last appearance on the original series is surprisingly tragic. It begins as a comic set piece with Audrey chaining herself to the door of a bank vault. She's trying to drum up publicity for her father's Stop Ghostwood campaign. Unfortunately, immediately behind her inside the vault, a huge bomb explodes. It's quite a finale for one of the best and most likable characters in all of Twin Peaks. Audrey's storyline takes a particularly dark turn after the second season ends. Audrey is injured by the explosion and ends up comatose. While in the hospital, Audrey is visited by Agent Cooper's evil doppelganger from the Black Lodge. This dark creature from a nightmare rapes her while she lay unconscious. After she awakens, Audrey finds out that she is pregnant. She then immediately breaks off all contact with her father and raises the child alone. This is especially wounding after the reconciliation she and Ben went through just before her accident. Did she want to keep him away from her new child? Was she furious with him about the explosion or continued plotting around Ghostwood? She even refused to let Ben even meet the grandchild at all. Her interactions with her father were probably minimal or non-existent. Audrey eventually opened up a beauty parlor and closed off into her own little world with few friends or relationships. Audrey's child, Richard, is a malevolent psychopath who becomes involved with savage violence, theft, drug dealing, vehicular homicide, and murder. Audrey does not openly speak about her son, but it must have been psychologically destructive for her to witness her offspring become a monster. Around the year 2000, Audrey entered into a loveless marriage with her accountant, Charlie, for financial reasons. Audrey's scenes in Twin Peaks: The Return are the most provocative and divisive on the series, perhaps even including the ending. She appears mid-season entirely unannounced and unexpected after 12 episodes. She appears, presumably in her home at night with her husband. She behaves strangely and is belligerent towards Charlie, insulting and threatening him for no apparent reason. Audrey is involved with some sort of odd background story with some of the residents of Twin Peaks. We never actually see these characters. The entirety of the story is told secondhand in brief snatches of conversation. It's immensely frustrating not knowing what in the heck is going on, and trying to relate the story becomes an exercise in futility. But I'll do it anyway. A man named Billy was apparently having an extramarital affair with Audrey. A fact Audrey is quite happy to tell her husband about to his face. He may be involved in some sort of violent crime, or maybe with Richard, or maybe someone attacked him, and there's another woman apparently involved. She is greatly concerned about her lover's safety, and insists that she and Charlie go together to the roadhouse to look for Billy. Audrey seems emotionally unwell during these scenes. She's close to hysteria, wringing her hands, and appears nervous and scared. She even questions what is real and has something of an existential crisis on her hands. Who is she? Where is she? She's stashed away in this odd room and seems incapable of movement. Why can't she leave on her own? It's like she's trapped in a quagmire. It all seems oddly disconnected from the rest of the show. She also utters the very strange lines, "It's like Ghostwood in here." Where is the "in here" she's talking about? Surely not just in her home. Is it in her head? Is she in the Black Lodge somehow? It calls into question everything that's going on in her scenes, or perhaps the entire series. Her husband Charlie seems like a somewhat pathetic character at first. He looks tiny and is oddly proportioned. Later on, though, Charlie seems a bit more menacing and tells Audrey that he might have to end her story. It sounds so threatening and cruel, but we don't really know what he means by it. Does he control the fantasy world she might be experiencing? Audrey asks if her story is the little girl who lives down the lane. Afterward, Audrey and Charlie finally go to the roadhouse in search of Billy, and bizarrely, the MC calls out that it's time for Audrey's dance. The entire bar moves to the side of the dance floor, and Audrey dances dreamily, just as she did in the original series, and except this time she's swathed in purple light. Music from the original series plays and eventually starts going backwards. We then get the most confusing scene change ever. After a Lynchian flash of electricity, we get the briefest glimpse of Audrey, in a white gown in an unknown room, staring at herself in the mirror. What any of this means is up for interpretation. Later on in the series, the evolution of the arm mentions the little girl who lives down the lane to Cooper, tying in Audrey's tale with the utmost importance to the most confusing sections of the season 3 finale. In my own interpretation, Audrey seems to be in a mental health facility, and her sequences are in fact all dreams or some sort of bizarre interaction with the Black Lodge, brought on by her assault by Doppelcooper, although she seems to know about things that are actually happening in the real world. Billy is indeed missing, but how does she know about that if she's locked away inside? Back in season 1, Audrey mentions that her older brother Johnny has emotional problems and that it runs in the family. Her father also experienced his own drift into delusion or psychosis. She presumably entered the nut house sometime in the 2000s after her marriage to Charlie turned sour, or perhaps after her son Richard became more and more evil. While inside, she continues to dream very dark dreams about Twin Peaks and its inhabitants. I mentioned before that Audrey is linked quite closely to Laura Palmer. Laura was viciously assaulted by her own father when he was possessed by the evil Black Lodge creature known as Bob. This event is hideously repeated when Doppelcooper, also inhabited by Bob, brutally assaults Audrey as she lays sleeping. After being attacked, Laura Palmer gradually loses her grip on reality. She would see lodge spirits in town or walk into the lodge or the convenience store in her dreams, take things out of her dreams. Her hold on the real world began to loosen. Could this also be happening to Audrey? Did the terrible destructive force of Doppelcooper permanently shatter Audrey's ability to see reality, eventually pushing her, years later admittedly, into institutionalization? Could her pre-existing genetic mental troubles have been exacerbated by Doppelcooper's impending return to Twin Peaks? We learn in season 3 that Laura is the one, and her story is savagely repeated in what could be her twin, her sister in adversity, Audrey. Whatever happened to Audrey, she continues to be of the greatest importance to the series, and even was a part of what could be the absolute best part of the entire third season. Watching her sway dreamily in her own head or in an evil dream, soaking in purple light while everyone watches her. It's a bizarre, backwards replay of her most iconic moment. It's similar to what we know and love, but it's changed and warped somehow. It's become bizarre and almost unrecognizable. Sort of like a strange third season 25 years later to a television show made back in 1989. Let's hope that there's some sort of season 4 where we get more about Audrey's story. But as of right now, Audrey dances into the night, forever lost in the haunted woods of Twin Peaks.